You really can't do effective calf strengthening if the calves are stuck in a shortened position. And when that happens, which will happen with plantar flexion, which means the foot is pointed down, in plantar flexion, the gastroc and the soleus, which are the calf muscles, they're in a shortened position. And that often happens when a pelvis is not centered, when it's not in a symmetrical or what we call a neutral position. And that's most people that come in to see me for pain. If the pelvis is stuck forward on one side because of an anterior pelvic tilt on one or both sides, the calf muscles can't really be going through a full range of motion. And if they can't go through a full range of motion, you really can't train them effectively. So what you have to do first is stretch them or inhibit them, but that will still depend on the position of the pelvis and the position of this asymmetric body, and that's what this video is going to talk about. Now I'm going to show a calf stretch towards the end of the video. I mean, you can skip there if you want, but I would highly recommend understanding how to do it, because the ability for you to stretch your calf effectively and then retrain the calves effectively lies in the position of the pelvis above it. So if you don't understand where you're placing your body weight and where you should place the position of your pelvis, you will not get an effective stretch. So according to Gait analysis, it's a very famous book by Jacqueline Perry, she states that the gastroc and the soleus, their main job is to control the ankle and the foot, mostly during after heel strike and then what we call mid-stance. And at mid-stance, that stability, walking is very little muscular effort besides the initial push to get started. After that, it's mostly momentum coming from the upper body and arm swing. But as one foot is in the air and the other foot is grounded, at that point, that's where the calves, the gastroc and the soleus, and then also in the front, the tibialis anteriors, and some other muscles, but those are the primary ones, are really the muscles that are stabilizing the lower leg and the foot. But that stabilization also depends on the position of the pelvis on top of those legs. If someone comes in to see me and they cannot pass these tests, their leg will not adduct on one or both sides, it means that pelvis is forward on that side. Now, again, that can happen on one or both sides. It's the left AIC pattern, as defined by Postural Restoration, or the PEC pattern. It just means extension on one or both sides of the body. When you're in that position for too long, the pelvis becomes unstable. So the only way that the calves, the gastroc and the soleus, can act like normal calves is if you have stability in the pelvis. But if the pelvis is forward on one or both sides, the ability for the gastrocs to act like normal muscles, which can then be lengthened and shortened, which is called normal muscular activity, that is compromised once you lose pelvic stability. And because of this internal asymmetry that we all have, humans preferentially will place their weight more to the right. That means the left side of the pelvis will come forward, we shift over to the right, and that's because of this normal asymmetry found in the bigger right diaphragm that is holding you over your right side every time you take a breath. And that's really why the right calf is usually, for most people, going to be tighter than the left. You can have tight calves on both sides, especially because, again, like I said, sometimes both sides of the pelvis come forward in a bilateral anterior pelvic tilt. In that case, neither femur, neither tibia, neither foot is going through normal ranges of internal rotation and external rotation. Or even in the foot, you'll call it supination and pronation, or inversion and eversion, however you want to talk about those movements. However, the point being, the calves are compromised, and thus you really can't train them effectively. So what's the problem with tight calves? Well, first, the main problem is this. If the calves are tight, the foot cannot go through cycles of heel, arch, big toe. So you're not getting pronation and supination, alternating activity. And that can end up in a lot of different issues like plantar fasciitis, which I experienced for 5 years. My feet were always my weight was always on the outside of both of my feet, which goes with a pelvis that is stuck forward on both sides and a rib cage that is flared on both sides. Not only that, you could have shin splints, knee issues, hip pain. It goes all the way up the chain. The real issue is that when the plantar flexors, the calf muscles, stay overactive and they hold the foot in a bit of a plantar flexed state, they're trying to control forward movement. So when you get heel strike, which is where the toes are pointed up at heel strike, the foot starts to come down, the front of the shins, the anterior tibialis, they're holding on for dear life to prevent that from going in an uncontrolled way. And at the same time, the tibia, the lower leg, starts to move forward so it's starting to dorsiflex. But when the calves become overactive, particularly on the right side, you can't get good dorsiflexion on the right side. So you'll see that with a lot of people. Their dorsiflexion on the left is fine, but on the right, their dorsiflexion is limited. It's because, yes, the calves are tight, preventing dorsiflexion and thus preventing forward knee movement, which has to happen during squatting and reverse lunging and all types of single leg exercises. When that knee can't progress forward, you can't get normal hip strength development. So, but the real issue is still going to come from the pelvis. So when you want to stretch or inhibit overactivity of the right calf, you have to be able to get your pelvis to turn to the left at the same time. So as the author of this book states, equal sharing of body weight would place the body vector through the center of the support area. In reality, the normal quiet standing posture tends to be shifted slightly to the right of midline. That's because of the bigger right diaphragm and just the way that the hemispheres of the brain work and how our visual system and the auditory system, and humans are just right dominant individuals. That's all brain activity. That's well established in the science. So you're never going to be perfect. So even when you're standing there and you think you're on 2 feet, you are on 2 feet, but you're still going to be more to the right than to the left. That's a really important understanding. So if you try to stretch your calves, or your right calf in particular, you're still over to the right side, but the right calf for the right calf to lengthen, that requires a pelvis to move to the left as you do it. An effective right calf stretch would also require, remember, a pelvis that can turn to the left. So you need to learn how to use a left hamstring and left inner thigh to help turn your pelvis to the left. Now, in postural restoration, a very typical technique is a 90-90 hip lift with hip shift. There's an example of this on my website, which there will be a link to it in the description. And there's also a free download that you can download, which really gives you the basic foundational science of postural restoration, which my whole YouTube channel is about. But there's a lot of videos. So there's a document PDF that I created that you can download, which will help give you more background on all this topic of asymmetry. So this is what the calf stretch will look like. What you're going to do, you're just going to put your hands against the wall. You're going to walk yourself back a little bit so your arms are outstretched. You're going to put about 80% of your weight through your left heel. 80% of your weight through your left heel because you want your pelvis turned to the left to lengthen the right side. Right side can't lengthen if your body weight is still over on it. And then you just breathe into your back. I push my arms backwards a little bit and I'm expanding my rib cage back as I breathe. My feet are pointed forward. They can't be turned out and I feel stretch. And then when I do it, this is from the back, same position, but you're going to see me kind of move my pelvis over to the left a little bit. I kind of shift my weight over to the left as I keep my right foot completely flat and I'm sensing the arch and big toe of that right foot because that's the sequence of events during upright walking. So what does it look like overall from the side again? I'm trying to create compression because remember, you're compressed over on your right side as a right dominant human because remember, that center of gravity is really over to the right. The midline is to the right. It's not really in the center. So that leaves you to be an overly compressed, a right calf that will constantly stay in an overly compressed position when you can't effectively shift to your left. So I'm going to switch it. I'm just going to try to put 80% of my weight through my left heel, create a sense of compression through my left side, breathe into my back so the rib cage, which is called the thoracic rib cage, can expand backwards as I breathe. And my right heel is down, but my weight is more, I'm sensing not my right heel. I'm not trying to sense my right heel. I'm trying to sense my right arch and my right big toe. Right arch and right big toe are associated with shifting over to your, I can't even do it, but over to your left. So as you push through your big toe, your pelvis is turning to the left. That's what happens during walking as your left heel is hitting the ground. So we're trying to inhibit through a neurological brain process. You can't just stretch a calf. You can, but it doesn't make any sense to the brain. You have to inhibit that tension or tightness of the calf. And that can only be done when the movement makes sense to the brain. You got to tell the brain, why do I want this right calf to lengthen or the left calf to lengthen? Well, you do that by giving it appropriate sensory inputs that are associated with going to your left side, which will then tell the brain, oh, it's time to inhibit or let go or stretch this right calf. Without that, you're never really going to get an effective calf stretch. So that's really what's happening. Now, you can switch it, and you can move the left foot behind and the right foot forward, but keep your weight still, 80% of your weight still through your left heel. Because not only do we struggle to get to our left side, we then have to learn how to stay on our left side longer. And if the left calf is tight, you're not going to stay on your left foot long enough. That normal human asymmetry of the brain and body will try to pull you back to your right side as quickly as possible. So whether you're doing it for your right calf or your left calf, you still want 80% of your body weight through your left side as you do them for your brain to understand how to deal with this normal human asymmetry that resides within all of us.